Our politics in Kenya is based on ethnic mobilization. And even the Gen Zs, we have seen a number of them pandering to the ethnic warlords or ethnic kingpins. That is my worry. It is my worry because there are very few Kenyans. They are only people from their tribe. You hear people talking about Gema, talking about Mulembe Nation, talking about the Luo Nation, talking about the Mijikenda Nation. And people of Kenyan origin should read a book that was written by Koigi wa Wamwere towards genocide in Kenya, the curse of negative ethnicity, if only to warn ourselves that if we continue on this trajectory, then we are on a slippery path. So, in a nutshell, I would want to say that the Gen Zs or the young people shook the system, but it would appear that the system was shaken but not stirred, and that therefore they are back with a bang and doing the things that we thought they would stop doing, and that is sad, which then indeed suggests that a lot more must be done. My good friend David Mailu has written a short book in which he is urging the Gen Zs, don't stop, because it is necessary that we change this particular political culture. It is a culture that started a long time ago, and if you look at the leading politicians now, they all belong to Kenya African National Union, which has since mutated and formed different parties. So the culture has not changed.
And when you say they belong to KANU, basically, I remember there's the former Lin Jiru once said, these are political cousins.
Yes.
All of them. And you've spoken about stirring. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen across Africa, like in Mozambique, there are still protests as we speak. This is like a month after the elections. In West Africa, what happened is maybe now the army decided, you know what, we can't keep pushing for something that is not happening. And they decided to have a coup. And that happened across, I think, 4 nations so far. As we head towards 2025, are we going to see more of coups in Africa, and especially in East Africa? Is that even a possibility?
You know, Africans are tired. Africans are tired because they are being led by individuals or groups of individuals who do not have their interests at heart. They are engaged in activities that are inimical to the general interest of the people. The levels of theft and greed and wastage are high. And elections only give them the possibility of gaining a veneer of legitimacy. It used to be the case that coup d'etats were the ways in which this was happening, particularly in the 1960s. Then there was a lull. After the coup d'etat, then we had the guerrilla movements, as we saw in Uganda in 1986. Rwanda, of course, is unique in 1994. In Ethiopia, when Meles Zenawi removed the Deg regime, we also saw the War of Independence that brought about South Sudan in the year 2011. But right now, particularly in the Sahel, we have seen coup d'etat in Burkina Faso, coup d'etat in Niger, coup d'etat in Mali, coup d'etat in Guinea, coup d'etat in Gabon. And all these is because the people became helpless and surrendered to manipulative politicians who are capable of winning, as it were, through the ballot to the detriment of the people. In East Africa, it is not as easy as that. And I think the reason why in East Africa it has been very difficult is because of ethnicity. Your typical East African nation, and I'm saying in this regard, and I must mention the countries, Tanzania, in my view, is immune, because I think they have a firm foundation. The founding father, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, founded a party, TANU, and then in 1977 they merged with Afro-Shirazi of Sheikh Abeid Karume and created CCM, which is present in the hearts and minds of Tanzania, and ethnicity does not play a critical role in that country. So Tanzania is safe. Kenya, on the other hand, is a totally different kettle of fish. From 1963, our basis of political mobilization has been ethnicity, so that individuals may belong to different political parties, but when the politics and the elections are about, they form these coalitions. And you've seen certain politicians actually in the last 20 years have belonged or been members of at least 13 political formations. And none of them ever participates in any election under the same party. And people are then mobilized from an ethnic standpoint. And so that there is no ideological wedding between the people and ideas, even in the armed forces, where recruitment is also fundamentally based on ethnic distribution. So it's very difficult, in my view, to have an unconstitutional change of power in the manner that we have had in the Sahelian region. But if there was a revolution that would come from the people, that is a possibility. And those who think that the obituary of the protests brought about by the Gen Zs can now be written are wrong. Because when I travel across Kenya and walk to people, people are angry. They are angry because they see the opulence of the political leadership, the arrogance of the political leadership. Meanwhile, they can't pay school fees. Meanwhile, they can't feed themselves. Meanwhile, professionals cannot be paid salaries. So the answer to the question as to whether there is a possibility of a coup d'etat in Kenya, I think it is not easy. But the people are rising, and when the people are rising, you never know what may happen. In Uganda, of course, it is equally difficult because, after the NRA, NRM, even the National Army are cadres of the NRA, NRM. And of course, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the country is confused, and the eastern part of it is inhabited and infested with guerrilla groups. Some say about 120 of such groups and counting. South Sudan, of course, has its problems, and as we talk, is the only country in the world that has 5 vice presidents, and they are going through negotiations in Nairobi, Kenya. After the revitalized peace agreement collapsed, there is now one called Tumaini. Somalia is another difficult place. We've just seen on the 15th day of December or thereabouts the conflict between the forces from Mogadishu and the forces in Jubaland fighting one another. So that country is also in trouble. So we see an East African region. Of course, Rwanda is very firmly tied under the administration of President Kagame. Burundi is a difficult country, still a very recluse in the manner in which it conducts her affairs. But one is beginning to see agitation because we have a young population, a population that really wants things to be done and done quickly, and they are getting dissatisfied. And history teaches us that there is no regime that can be immune from a people's uprising. So those in political leadership had better smell the coffee.
And they better do it sooner than later.
Indeed.
And that uprising that we've seen in the Sahel region has led to now these juntas sending away the West, the France, the Americans. They've been sent away. What's the impact of that across Africa? And is that the new independence that will help us do away with the new colonialism? Or is it again another chance just to have people in power, then put another status quo?
And I love what is happening in the Sahel. In fact, from where I sit, it is a revolution. It is a revolution that came about because those who are in positions of leadership were lackeys of the French administration, are colonizing power that has never wanted to leave. And the message that they have sent is as clear as it is eloquent, that we are not going to allow our countries to be exploited. You are not going to take our uranium, you are not going to take our oil, you are not going to take our cobalt, you are not going to take our rare earth. We are going to mine it and enter into friendships that are symbiotic and that are going to help us use our resources for our people's benefit. It is a good thing. and one only hopes that it will be built upon. The tragedy, of course, is that the French and the powers that were thrown out are doing everything in their power, covertly and overtly, in order to undermine these administrations, including saber-rattling diplomacy, which we have seen with the docking of a French warship off the coast of La Côte d'Ivoire. And you've seen that ECOWAS itself is also being used, and they have said that they will not collaborate or cooperate with the Sahelian states. And as at the 16th day of December 2024, having received notification of the Sahelian countries that they want to leave, I think they are leaving and forming their own regional bloc. But to their credit, they have said that citizens of ECOWAS, to mean other countries that are not in the Sahel, will enjoy certain rights. In other words, they are saying, we want an Africa that unites, but unites in the spirit that was anticipated by the founding fathers, such as the Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah, Ahmed Ben Bella, and Gamal Abdel Nasser, and of course, individuals such as Mwalimu Nyerere and later Thomas Isidore Sankara.
And it's amazing to see these developments that are happening there. And with the dissatisfaction also, and just looking at the democratic space, we are seeing elections. You've just mentioned the new president of Namibia. And that makes her now the second woman president in Africa. Having her
elected. Remember, there is Samia Suluhu Hassan.
Yes, Samia.
Who ascended by dint of an act of God that took Joseph Magufuli out of this earth.
Yeah, and by there, it's good to hear what you will have to say about her leadership in the period that she's been, and now that Tanzania is going to an election soon. So my question is, on this women leadership, is there anything out of this world that these two countries are experiencing? Or is it another exciting thing because, well, it was a woman, we were happy, and then?
You know, I am not one who wants to genderize leadership. But it's true that women have been excluded from the political space over the years, and that we are beginning to see strong women emerging and the electorate responding to them in a positive way. We have the story of Johnson Sirleaf in Liberia, and let us remember that Johnson Sirleaf was active against the administration of Charles Taylor, and that it is on the basis of her credentials that she was elected. Nandi is a stalwart and a veteran of the struggle. Nandi in Namibia was fighting along people like Kandimba, Haman Toivo, and Sam Nujoma and Swapo. So this is a logical progression. And the Namibians are sending the message that we are looking at the quality of these individuals and we are voting them on that basis. So I do not want us to emphasize the fact that she is a woman. I think potentially her history tells us that she is likely to be a good leader. But remember that history has also taught us that potential itself is not sufficient, and I hope that she'll live up to the billing and demonstrate to the world that indeed it doesn't matter whether you are a man or woman. If you have the necessary credentials and the support of the people, then you will deliver. I wish her well.
Yeah, we wish her the very best. Coming back maybe home and across Africa, the church has played a significant role across all generations. In Kenya in particular, we remember the days of Bishop Muge, when Cardinal Njue was a bishop, he was very active, Timothy Njoya, and now we have a generation that has happened where they just went mum. And now, after all these happenings that have happened across Kenya, the Catholic Church, the ACK Church, I think NCCK have woken up and said, now we have to call out this administration for all the ills they've committed. Congo, we saw how the Catholic bishops influenced how politics is done. What do we look forward to the church, and has the president managed to divide, because now he's meeting evangelicals in State House and yet they're not giving feedback of what they discussed, and that is not making the citizens happy.
Yeah, it's true that in Kenya and indeed across Africa, the church, and I want us to make a clear distinction. When we talk about the church, we are not just talking about the clergy. we are also talking about the laity.
Yes.
We tend to focus too much on the clergy as if the clergy are the ones who constitute the church. But because they are the more visible, it is right that their misbehavior is then interpreted as meaning the behavior of the church. And in Africa, we have seen persons of religious persuasion, and it's not only Christians. We have seen Hindus, we have seen Muslims, have seen practitioners of African traditional religion. And in South Africa, for example, we remember the activities of Desmond Tutu, the activities of Alan Busak, and these were individuals who are heavily involved in politics. In Zimbabwe, individuals such as Ndambaningi Sitole were high-ranking party officials while at the same time serving as church leaders. And in Kenya, to be specific, particularly during the presidency of Daniel Moi, when we were under a single-party dictatorship, church leaders were very vocal. They played a critical role in the constitution-making process. And the late Bishop Okulu actually did write a book, Church and Politics, in which he was telling the political leadership that line can never be drawn, because the political leaders were quick to say that clergy should not involve themselves in politics. But what is politics other than the organization of human affairs for the general benefit of the same humans who are voters and also churchgoers and also mosque attendees and temple attendees and also traditional worshippers? So what happened at a certain stage, particularly after we made and gave unto ourselves the 2010 Constitution? The assumption on the part of Kenyans was that this constitution would then enable us to realize certain goals which could not be realized during the single-party state. But we have realized, to our surprise, that the political class is capable of circumnavigating the Constitution, abusing that Constitution, and buying or recruiting the opposition, the government in power, recruiting the opposition leaders in their ranks, and therefore neutering the entire process in Parliament. They capture Parliament, capture critical institutions, and the only institutions that are then left to agitate are those outside of formal government. And it gladdened my heart when I saw the Catholic Church doing what they used to do during the days of Maurice Cardinal Odinga, and of course my good friend Jue, and I saw my friend Muheria and his Anyolo and the others coming out and making a clear statement that will not allow the pulpit to be used for reasons other than the worship of God. And I saw immediately the Anglican Church also coming out strongly. And I saw the Presbyterian Church coming out strongly. And the NCCK coming out strongly. But yet, the government, in an attempt to divide the body of the church, are now engaging churches which I consider to be fringe churches in the Pentecostal evangelical movement. We do not know what they discuss when they go there. But I'm normally very scared when I see men and women in cloth, in the dog's collar, emerging out of a palace or the state house, and we are not told what discussion they engage in. And it is quite possible that these individuals could be recruited as fifth columnists with the idea of saying that really the church is divided. But as we talk about the church, we should also remember that they are the Muslims and the Hindus. And in the run-up to the making of the Constitution in 2001, 2002, under the initiative called the Ufungamano Initiative, all these shades of religions and denomination and faiths came together and participated in the process in a very intimate way. And it is important that they remain vigilant, because democracy or good governance not only requires but demands that the populace is vigilant. It is our duty, therefore, to ensure that they remain on that path in critiquing the government and making demands and ensuring that the government or the administration of President Ruto, as it is now, does what is in the best interest of the country without pandering to Western countries. You saw there was an American ambassador, Meg Whitman, who was almost behaving as if she was the governor of Kenya. And Kenyans were very happy when she said that she had tendered resignation to President Joe Biden, anticipating that President Trump would be coming in the month of January, the year 2025. So it is important that we have the church and the mosques and the temples and the shrines coming together and saying we will not allow people to abuse their political offices for short-term interests and in order to enjoy the perks that go along with political power in the continent of Africa.
So overall, what we have to do, eternal vigilance is the price we have to pay.
Absolutely. And to approach these things without fear of consequence. Cowards die many times. We must have men and women who are brave, men and women who are prepared to pay the ultimate price for the sake of this generation and generations yet to be born.
And for people, I mean, even in our generation now, there are actually, say, about 60, the number that was given of the young people who paid the price for good governance, which essentially hasn't been achieved yet. The other thing that comes with this church business is nowadays, even after we saw the Pentecostal bishops, Bishop Mark, Bishop J.B. Masinde, Arthur Kitonga, the Meru bishops who went with C.S. Rinturi, after that meeting, on the online space especially, everyone was saying these people went for the brown envelope. Mm-hmm. So the question is, are we now putting the president in a place where he cannot host a meeting with anyone because we will accuse them of having brokered deals?
You know, I am on record as writing to the president whenever I think there are issues that ought to be dealt with. And I wrote a fairly long letter to the president. And in my letter, I said many things, one of which was that there is a trust deficit. Whether despite the best intentions of the president, there is a general belief that he is not doing well. It is therefore incumbent upon the president to ensure that he regains the trust of the people. Once he does that, then the people will give him the benefit of doubt, and that is work that he must do.
So
in other words,
what would you tell him? How does he recover this trust?
What I told him, actually, not what will I tell him.
Yes.
I told him, number one, that you must be believable. When you make a statement as a head of state, make sure that what you say is done. And if it is not done, come and tell the people in clear terms why it has not been done. But people can give you a list of 10 things that His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, said will be done, and none of them will be done. Instead, the things that the people don't want to be done are the things that are being done. In other words, it is important for him to change. And this has been done before. Great leaders in Africa, when they made mistakes, they came and apologized. That is Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere's greatness. That is Kenneth Kaunda's greatness. That is Nkrumah's greatness. That is Samora Moises Machel's greatness. That is Ahmed Ben Bella's greatness. That is Nelson Holisa Mandela's greatness. We are all human beings and fallible. Therefore, don't assume when you are in a position of leadership that you hold the power and the monopoly of wisdom and that you are infallible. If you do that, the people will say it. When they think the king is naked, they will say it, because the activities of the king affect the citizens. And I'm using the word king metaphorically.
That's very true, and I hope your message gets to
I
the right
pray
places.
And hope so.
Do you know if your letter was
Of
delivered?
course, not that I know. It was delivered. When I write, I don't know how they get to the press. You'll discover that my letters are actually marked confidential, and they are delivered confidentially. There must be people who come across those letters and actually post them in the media because they think that the message ought to be made known to the public. And I do not quarrel with them when I myself, to my surprise, sometimes see those letters in the media while I actually delivered them under confidential cover. And this is not the first time that I've written. I started writing to heads of state when I was a second-year student at the University of Nairobi. And there is not a single Kenyan head of state that I've not raised issues with when I felt there was something to do, because I believe that that is the responsibility of a good citizen. Whether they listen or not is not my business. Somebody was asking me, but do they reply? Then I asked, when Paul was writing letter to the Galatians and the Ephesians, have you ever seen in the Bible the reply of the Colossians? My duty is to write and to put my case for the general good.
That's very good. And that's what active citizenship actually is. Now, the U.S. In a few days will have officially inaugurated a new president, that is Trump. His first term relationships with Africa were a bit not the best, so to say, or were best, depending on how you look at it. Now he's in for the second term. What are we expecting across as Africa, and particularly for Kenya with this Ruto's administration?
You know, contrary to what people say, I actually wanted Mr. Trump to win the elections, and for two selfish reasons. Number one, that I've always had my difficulties with neoliberals, and the Democrats in America represent these. They are the people who smile with you and they stab you. I prefer somebody who doesn't smile with me and tells me to my face, you are this. And my understanding of history is that the Republicans have done that much more consistently whenever they are in power. But remember that America is America, and as Reagan once said many years ago, America does what is in America's best interest. Administrations come and go, but there are certain things that will continue to happen a la America, notwithstanding that there is a new administration, whether of the Democrats or of the Republicans. So I hope that Mr. Trump will understand that his nation is a powerful nation, and that they have a duty to work with other nations in a manner that is mutually beneficial. I am very happy that they are not going to dictate to us, or I hope that they will not dictate to us. There will be no Pax Americana, and I hope that that will also make us wake up. This idea in the continent of Africa that we always go around the world with begging bowls, yet we have so many resources, should be discarded. And I want an American president who is going to tell us, you people take charge of your affairs. And I hope that this administration in its second term is going to do exactly that. Remember that the administration of Joe Biden somehow almost immediately from a geostrategic and geopolitical standpoint identified Kenya and adopted her president as the blue-eyed boy. And you know that they even made Kenya a non-member NATO ally, a completely unprocedural act. When you are entering into such an arrangement, Parliament ought to be involved. Because when you become a non-member NATO ally, then you are saying that we are a target in the event of war with China or Russia or other people. So it's something that ought not to have happened, and I hope that we are going to revise it. And in any event, within the context of the East African community and within the context of the non-aligned movement, we ought not to have such relationship with the United States of America or any other country. We should operate. I'm quite certain that America will occasionally give you retired military equipment, which is retired and repainted from different war theaters such as Afghanistan, Syria, or Jordan, and then they give them to you as new, and you celebrate, and you say, we now have this equipment. And then, of course, what happens is that then you begin to buy spare parts. They are given for free, but by the time you buy spare parts in the second year, you have paid for a brand new one. We must wake up.
And in this awakening, what do we expect of now Kenya-US relations?
I hold the view that the relationship must remain good. There is no reason why we should be quarreling with the United States of America. What we don't want and what we must not allow is for us to be dealt with as if we are little boys and little girls to do the bidding of the United States of America. We may be small, but we must be proud. The pride that the mosquito shows when it meets the elephant and frustrate the elephant. That is the kind of pride that I want.
And maybe part of adopting this pride is now I think a few months ago, the president said Kenya may join in BRICS soon. The summit happened in October, and of course we know if you're in BRICS, you cannot be an American friend. So are we going to join BRICS or not? If we do, what does that mean for our relations with these other nations? And considering sometimes earlier in the year, the president had called out, taken a stand on the Russia-Ukraine war, saying that Russia was the aggressor in this case.
You know, we have a very confused foreign policy. And this is something that has happened in Kenya, that our foreign policy has always lacked clarity. During the apartheid regime in South Africa, we behaved as if we were supporting apartheid. Yep. We were not clear. Tanzania was clear, Zambia was clear, but we were not clear. We must not be lukewarm, and we must not be people who are manipulated. So we are either in BRICS or we still want to be manipulated by the IMF and the World Bank. And my view is that BRICS is necessary. It is a counterweight to the domination that we have had over the years of the Western world and IMF and World Bank and WTO, which are these Bretton Woods institutions. It must be remembered that even the WTO, which came later, was actually a product of Bretton Woods, except that it was delayed and we had the general agreement on tariffs, that is GATT. So BRICS is a good thing. It gives many countries an opportunity to negotiate from a position of strength. But in order to do so, African countries must also make sure that the big boys and girls in BRICS, such as Brazil, China, Russia, and India, understand that Africa is an equal partner. The problem of Africa is that we are divided into too many little countries, some of which are not viable. But if we speak with a single African voice, then we will be heard and will create an economic system that is going to liberate us from the dominance and control from Bretton Woods institutions and, of course, the European Union, which is re-emerging and is showing great appetite to control activities in the continent of Africa, to control even our Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
And they really have a push on such areas. You've spoken about our Kenyan policy, and just the other day, they did a review of Kenya's foreign policy. I don't know if you've gone through it and what you feel the impact will be for us in terms of our relations with other nations. Is it now straightforward?
No. You know, what is on paper and what happens on the ground is something that is very different, particularly in Kenya, because we are not consistent. The documentation will be perfect, but how we behave lacks consistency and lacks clarity. And I would have loved for Kenya to remember that within East African region, our desire was to move as one, so that even in terms of foreign policy, I would want to see a more coherent foreign policy that is indeed articulated from the East African Community headquarters in Arusha. So the Arusha diplomacy. How are we going to relate with the European Union? How are you going to relate with Russia, with China, with Turkey, with the United States of America, with Canada, and all these other countries? But if we still want to go it solo, then we are going to have many missteps. And you can see some of the pronouncements when you see bureaucrats in this administration. The things they say and the things that are happening on the ground sometimes are like day and night, sometimes like East and West, which is not a good thing.
East and West caught me because I'm going to ask. We've always had the thing of sometimes we want to look East, sometimes we want to look West, all based on interests. With this, the Trump administration consideration, and with what has been happening across Africa, where is Africa going to look? Are we still divided with some looking east, some looking west, others forward, as Nkuruba had put, or where do we stand?
The Osagyefo was right. Africa must neither look east nor west. Africa must look forward. And in this regard, when she looks forward, it means that she is going to collaborate with all friends of goodwill, notwithstanding that you are from the east or the west. That was the very basis of the non-aligned movement. You remember when the founding leaders of the non-aligned movement met in Belgrade in Yugoslavia, that was President Josip Broz Tito of Yugoslavia, President Sukarno of Indonesia, the Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, the President of Egypt, of the United Arab Republic at that time, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and of course the Prime Minister, then President of Ghana, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. The whole idea was that we were non-aligned but positively neutral. And at that time, the world was divided into the Soviet Union and, of course, the Western world led by the United States of America. And after Winston Churchill had said that the Iron Curtain has fallen in the continent of Europe, there was the ideological contestation. And many of the countries that I'm talking about, which had themselves been victims of colonization, we are saying we are not going to align ourselves to any of these factions. We are going to look forward, but whenever necessary, if there is something we can do with the Chinese, so be it. If there is something that we can do with the Americans or the United Kingdom or Germany or Japan, so be it. And I think that that is the path that we should be talking about. But this will only be realized if within the African continent we move towards greater unity. We are so disunited, and it pains me, for example, when on the 16th day of December, I saw ECOWAS saying that they are now almost expelling the Sahelian group of countries. And the reason why the Sahelians really want to leave is because during the critical periods, the ECOWAS was seen to be acting at the bidding of Western powers and threatening them with military intervention. So you can understand. But I would love to see an Africa that is moving closer and closer to integration, if not a federation, a confederation. And it may not happen in our lifetime, but we want to see movement in that direction. And it can only happen if we are consistent in our rhetoric and, of course, resolute in our actions.
The dream for a united Africa, I think, has existed since independence across African nations. But even as we hope for a united Africa, the one thing that is so loud is the guns across. Africa does not manufacture guns, but we have so many guns where people are fighting across Sudan, Congo, and all those other regions. Who is in charge of silencing these guns? If, let's say, the president in Kenya tries to mediate and he's told, we can't take you because you're aligned. You go to the Sahel region, they are told, these ones, we can't involve them, these are coup leaders. So how do we silence the guns across Africa?
Remember, I believe it is the year 2021 that was designated by the AU. I may be wrong about the year, but just around about that time, when the AU said that this was the year of silencing the guns. But it is during that year that guns were now blazing. It is as if they were defying what had been made. That's when we saw Central African Republic go. That is when we saw the escalation of conflict in Libya, the insurgencies in the Sahel, in Burkina, in Niger, in Mali, in Chad, in southern Cameroon. We saw in eastern Congo, in Mozambique, in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Tigray, in Ethiopia, and of course we saw in Somalia the guns are still blazing. Who must make the decision? It is Africans. Kwame Nkrumah said it in an address in the 1960s, and when he said that we Africans must now acquire appetite for peace, because in the absence of peace we cannot realize the promises that we made unto ourselves when we regained independence. We are not going to ensure that we can feed ourselves. It is not going to be possible to educate our children. It's not going to improve health standards. We are not going to build infrastructure. We are not going to create social harmony. Unfortunately, there are individuals in the world that love a fighting Africa. as they say in Kiswahili, vita vya panzi furaha ya kunguru, which means when grasshoppers are dying, then of course the eagle or the hawk is very happy, because once they kill each other, then the eagle just eats them very nicely and slowly, because they have served themselves for dinner. So my view is, and I thought one would have thought that the African Union would do something about it, but the African Union is lethargic, is comatose, is completely pathetic, with the consequence that if you look at the wars that are being fought in Africa, they are being mediated outside. The mediation that is going on as regards the Sudanese, they rejected IGAD, because they thought they would be partisan. Where are they mediating it? In Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia. The conflict between Ethiopia and Somalia, where is it being mediated? In Ankara, in Turkey. And any attempt at local mediation does not go on as well as it should. Look at the attempt at mediation between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, which almost collapsed on the 16th day of December 2024 in Luanda, in Angola. And this, in my view, comes about because the current crop of African politicians who have the mandate are so focused on narrow issues. There is an obsession with elections. If you look at many African countries now, their obsession, if you go to Malawi now, they are talking about an election in 2025. Perhaps they should. In Zambia, they are talking about an election in 2026. In Uganda, about an election in 2026. In Kenya, about an election in 2027. Barely 2 years after the last election. So we are so preoccupied with election and holding public office that we forget that we need peace and tranquility in order to trade and liberate ourselves from sorrow and want. And that is why some of us have said that many African governments are nothing but kleptocracies and kakistocracies. Kleptocracies to mean that the theft is going on an industrial scale, and kakistocracy to mean that our worst men and women are the ones who have taken charge of our affairs, and their vision for the continent of Africa is like the vision of a mosquito and that of a warthog. When you compare that with what happens with China when they meet, you hear them talking about China and Africa in trade 100 years from thence. That is vision. Statesmen thinking about the next generation, politicians thinking about the next elections.
Unlike our kakistocracy, which
yes.
we the people have played a
we
large
the
part.
people are also to blame. We the people of Africa vote because somebody has given us a bag of rice. We the people of Africa vote an individual because they belong to your tribe or your clan. We are co-authors of our own misfortune. Nyerere used to say, if we allow our stupidity to reign, then our stupidity will chew us and spit us.
And I think it's chewing us badly in this
It is
generation.
about to spit us.
It's very sad. One of the statesmen from Kenya we are looking forward to is Raila Odinga, because he's vying for the AUC chairmanship. They did the debate the other day. Do you feel convinced that he's done enough campaigning across?
First of all, I use the word statesman very differently. I don't support Mr. Odinga's bid for a number of reasons, and I've already stated that in different fora. Number one, because his bid is an attempt to use the AU position to exile him from local politics so that this administration may get the support of his constituency. That is not a reason why you give somebody a seat that requires young and vibrant individuals. Mr. Odinga is going to be 80 in the month of January. Really, at age 80, one should be writing his memoirs, not competing with younger people for holding an office, which is a secretariat's office. So, and even the manner and style in which he has campaigned is inconsistent with what the spirit of the AU is. There have been people who have held that office, they did not campaign in that manner. President Connery did not campaign in that manner. He was the first. Jean Ping of Gabon did not campaign in the manner that he is. Nkosazana and Lamini Zuma did not campaign in that manner. Mohamed Faki did not campaign in that manner. My own view is that Kenyans and other Kenyans, the Kenyan government may support him, but I believe that he is not my candidate.
He's not your candidate.
He's not my candidate.
I think maybe there are other Kenyans who...
Of course, there are other Kenyans in matters such as these. There are others, those who support you and others who don't support you, but I've given my reasons, and one does not need to agree with me.
Yeah. That's true. President Trump said that he would end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours once he's in office. Do you still believe that that will happen after January 20th?
I believe that those are good intentions. I believe that that war should come to an end. I believe there is a war which is visiting pain on both sides of the divide. But let us also understand the context of this war. The NATO alliance gave an assurance to the Russians in 1990 that they would not allow an eastward expansion of NATO to the east. They have reneged on this, and they are recruiting NATO to become an outpost in this regard. My own view is that that should not have happened, but unfortunately it has led to this war, and I believe that something should be done, because what we are seeing in Ukraine is a proxy war. A proxy war that is being fought by NATO using Ukraine as the theater of war. And I hold the view that if President Trump can come out firmly and resolutely, then it can stop. Whether it will be in 24 hours or not, a number of things have happened. There will be issues of territorial occupation. It is not going to be easy, but that is the right rhetoric. It is the right attitude, and I pray and hope that that is what is going to be allowed to happen so that we can begin to think differently. And I hope that NATO is going to persuade Ukraine not to insist on joining NATO, as it were.
And I agree, because I think that NATO thing, that's key in that whole idea, if that war is ever to end. Syria, the fall of Assad, who are the beneficiaries, and what's the future after this?
You know, when you ask about Syria, we've got to look at the historical context. In the 1958 to be exact, Gamal Abdel Nasser and Kitli, who was then the prime minister of Syria, entered into a pact, and they created something called the United Arab Republic. And indeed, Egypt was known as such until 1970. But no sooner had that settled in 1961 that there were coup d'etats, culminating in the 1966 coup d'etat, which saw Hafez al-Assad become the defense minister. And in 1970, then he had a coup and he became the president of Syria since then, until, of course, he died in 2000 when his son Bashar al-Assad. And Syria is a very interesting country because it is the confluence of very many contestations. The Alawite, who are ethnically based Shia sect Muslims. Then the Druze are also there. Then there are Sunnis. So Syria is seen as the home of the Shia. And that is why during the Assad regime, they have inclined towards Iran and towards Russia. Who then are the beneficiaries? And you can only talk about these beneficiaries in the long, short to medium and then long term. In the short term, I think the Israelis are beneficiaries. Beneficiaries in the sense that Syria had become a ground via which Hezbollah were organizing and even storing arms, and they have themselves on the 16th day of December 2024, they have said that they have lost one of their major supply routes. So Israel is going to be a beneficiary, and it is not lost on me that no sooner had it been announced that Bashar al-Assad had flown to Moscow than they extended their territorial occupation in the land contiguous to the Golan Heights, which they captured in 1973. It is also important to note that they Turks are going to be beneficiaries. In fact, they have just announced that they are opening their embassy in Damascus since the year 2012. So that is in the short to medium term. The losers in the short to medium term are Russia and Iran, because they backed the Assad regime, and I'm quite certain that this administration is going to do everything in their power to want to extradite Bashar al-Assad. If they do that, Russia may very well begin to have a rapprochement with them. In the short to medium term, you can also see that the Americans and the Western powers have said that we have made contacts with the administration in Damascus. They are now forgetting that this particular individual was a part of the Al-Qaeda ISIS group. So I think very quickly they are going to go into that space. And the Syrian leadership have said that they are going to do everything that is in the best interests of Syria. So if that is true, then I look forward to a time when they will not want to be aligned to any one faction, which means that they can manipulate the processes and get what is necessary from Russia, from China, and from all those other countries, and also get what is necessary from the Western world, because Syria needs massive reconstruction.
That's true, and I hope they are able to put an administration that can put the needs of Syrians first.
I hope and pray.
And with all these things, what does this mean for the relationship between Trump, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin, and Russia's President Putin, and maybe China to an extent?
You know, politics is not black and white. And I'm quite certain that President Trump will be looking at what is in the best interest of the United States of America. President Trump has had a conversation, I believe, on the 17th day of December or 16th day of December 2024 with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And Netanyahu is on record as saying that he told Trump that there is need for victory. And I'm quite certain that President Trump is going to listen to his military advisors, and the decision that will be made will not ignore the realities. People have no appetite for the continuation of that war to the extent that it disrupts movement of goods along the Suez Canal. And for that reason, I believe that there is going to be very careful negotiations with a view to ending the war for the general benefit. And I believe that that relationship is going to be one that requires maneuver. The second thing, as regards President Vladimir Putin, if one goes by the way they related during Trump's first administration, it would appear to me that they have a working chemistry, and that President Putin is perhaps more likely to believe President Trump in the manner that he did not believe the Biden administration. And if that is true, you could very easily have an armistice which will enable the war or to be stopped and negotiations to take root. The Chinese, of course, are very subtle in the sense that they are doing things that don't appear very threatening. They are engaging in what I call soft power, and they don't threaten you. They move stealthily. They move in a subterranean fashion. And I believe that you are going to see them in these spaces quite frequently and quite effectively.
I tend to think they know they have the power, just that if need be, we shall come out.
You know, if you are a student of literature, you must have read William Shakespeare's play, Measure for Measure, in which he says, it is good to have the powers of a giant, but it is tyrannous to use it like a giant. I think the Chinese know they have the power of a giant, and they don't use it as a giant. The Chinese know that they have fists of steel, but before they use them, they wear velvet gloves. And that is why you see them very present in different parts of the world.
True. Interesting perspective. Back home, we've seen current president, visiting the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. And word has it that Uhuru Kenyatta was invited to State House, and he said it's not going to happen. He was invited next to his house on State House Road. He said no. And the demand was, you must come to Gatundu if you want to see me. Immediately after that, we saw the not the ambassador, the guy in charge at the embassy of US visiting also in Gatundu. What's this Gatundu politics that has become very key?
Well, you are inviting me to swim in the ocean of speculation. I will swim, but I'll swim carefully.
Yeah.
One of the things that we must recognize is that President Ruto was President Uhuru's deputy president, and therefore they have a relationship. Remember also that President Ruto is going through a very weak phase, and that weakness, that weak phase has seen him wear the crutches that were provided unto him by Mr. Odinga's political party. And those crutches may very well break. So he's trying to ensure that if one set of crutches breaks, there is yet another set of crutches. He's trying to swim on both sides of the ocean, both sides of the pool, the deep and the shallow end. And my view is that this is the game that is being played. And remember, all these politicians have always worked together. And it doesn't surprise me that they can move from one place to the other. Is smokes and mirrors, and the Kenyan populace is then confused. In my view, there is nothing confusing. They are angling to retain their political position, their political clash, and they are already looking to the elections in 2027, and they are threatened by the fact that if there is a credible opposition which is properly organized, then they don't have a fighting chance. This is a grouping of individuals who want to retain power and the accompanying material wealth, whether they meet in Gatundu or meet in Nairobi or Mombasa in Dubai, does not matter. It is their intention that should concern us, and it is our duty to ensure that we unmask them and protect Kenya from any machinations which may be anti-Kenya.
That's totally agree. It's just cannibals who want to loot more of what we have. But what I wanted to find out is, how was it a coincidence that immediately the president left, the following day it was the embassy of US?
Yeah, but the embassy of the Western embassies do that quite often. They are simply recognizing that to speak what I call Kenyanese politics, that the former deputy president is very busy trying to work that part of the world, the Mount Kenya. And I believe that former President Kenyatta is being approached as a possible counterweight to the onslaught of the Rigathi Gachagua faction, which is emerging strongly. And the Americans also want to ensure that they are not left out of the party. So they are trying to persuade, in my view, or to ensure that they keep these individuals on a short leash with a view to ensuring that the geostrategic interests of the United States of America are not threatened in any way. Remember that President Ruto was a bosom friend of the former or departing Ambassador Meg Whitman, and they fear that may not augur well if we have a new administration which thinks differently. So this is political games and musical chairs. This is not the first time that they are being played. We had Smith Hempston here. We had Aurelia Brazil here. We've had this, and we've seen these kind of games.
Why is Mount Kenya so important in the political space in Kenya?
Critical. We're in a country where people vote on the basis of ethnicity. The demographics are very important. If the demographics favor them, if they put their votes in your basket, then you are doing very well. That is assuming that the young people in Mount Kenya have not been sufficiently liberated and will not be persuaded by these ethnic entreaties and will vote on the basis of what is in the best interest of Kenya.
You led the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission at some point, and corruption still to this day is something that you are not able to kill, and even the people who've come after, including the current Bishop Oginde, has not managed. What is not happening with this organization that they are not able to end this?
I love being asked questions because it's a most unreasonable question. There is no way that anybody created by any organization can kill corruption. Corruption is a personal inclination. It's like sin. You would possibly have asked that question, why are there so many churches and mosques and temples and people are still sinning? Because corruption is a sin. How many churches do we have and how many people are still sinning? Kenyans must make a resolve that they are not going to pay bribes when they are getting the IDs. They must make a resolve that they are not going to pay bribes to policemen when they are arrested. They must make a resolve that they are not going to pay bribes to obtain degrees. They are not going to pay bribes to do all the evil things or to achieve the evil things. There is nobody, even if you sent an army of angels to come to the world to head the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Never ever blame the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. A body of no more than 200 in a population of 50 million, how can they kill corruption? It is you who must change. It is Kenyans who must change. In very difficult circumstances, bodies are trying to do the best. And people forget the mandate of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission are three. It has three mandates. 1, prevention. 2, education. And very lastly, the visible one is what you see, prosecution. And we have seen it doesn't work. Look at the people who are in government now. They are some of the most corrupt individuals. And when they come out, they say the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is not working. So Kenyans must change this rhetoric about blaming the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. It is you to change. How is the Anti-Corruption Commission going to catch you when you are paying $1 million for tenders? Where? Even if we had a policeman for every individual. And remember, corruption is theft. And there is in the 10 commandments, a commandment says, thou shalt not steal. Obey that commandment. And stop blaming the wrong organization. That organization is only doing what it is capable of doing. In countries where people obey the law, it doesn't happen. Look at the way we drive. Look at the way we disobey laws. Look at the way we do things. So, the day you tell me that the number of churches reduce sin, that is the day I'll allow you to blame the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
And I don't see that day coming anytime soon. Your predictions for the year 2025, both for local space and the geopolitical space?
Locally, we are going through a very difficult space. First of all, there is this argument that the Kenyan economy is growing. The Kenyan economy is contracting. Forget the statistics from the World Bank. Just look at the sectors. Look at the agriculture sector. We are importing food. Look at the banking sector, which is the most successful one. And the reason, I'm asking you to look at the banking sector because of the number of properties that are being sold because people cannot repay their loans. Look at the tourism sector, we are losing numbers. Look at the manufacturing sector, factories are becoming warehouses. Look at the number of redundancies. The economy is contracting. Therefore, we expect problems. Look at the cost of governance. We have 47 counties, and each of the governors of those counties think they are presidents and want to behave like president. Consumption without production. South Africa, which has a constitution similar to us, has only 9 provinces. We have 47 counties, 47 governors, 47 deputy governors, 47 speakers, 47 deputy speakers, 47 cabinets, 47 executive arm of those cabinets. Until the day that we rethink and relook at our governance, this thing is top heavy and will collapse on its weight. Look at the accompanying corruption and the accompanying wastage. So, unless we change and begin to do things in the right way, I saw recently in a place in Rift Valley when there was a marathon and the political leaders came with helicopters. There were 13 helicopters parked there When there is such wastage and opulence, it also tells you one thing. You are annoying the people. The people are becoming angrier and angrier. That is why you see doctors rioting or protesting. That is why you see lecturers protesting. That is why you see us telling people to go and engage in jobs in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and other places, because our economy is not producing or generating enough jobs. But we can change it. If the political leaders were to sit back and say, let us reason together and let us begin to address agriculture. Let us begin to produce and produce good food. We'll stop importing maize. We'll stop importing onions.
You know, the president yesterday said for the last 2 years, we've not imported maize. I don't know if it's factual.
In my part of the world, which is the western part of the world, in Siaya, 50% of the goods in our shelves are from Uganda, including maize and cassava. So from what I know, we are surviving because we are getting food from other countries. You go to the border with Tanzania, see the amount of food that is coming into the country. So let us not make statements which are not supported by reality on the ground. Even milk, is it not that we have a spat with Uganda because later are trying to bring milk here? So we are in a bad space. And the faster we admit that we are in a bad space, the quicker we look for the solutions for our general benefit. I look forward to that.
And that has to take the leadership.
Immediately. Because my worry with 2025 is that we are already angling for elections in 2027, which means that if I'm an investor who wanted to come to Kenya, I'll suspend my investment decisions. Tanzania is going to an election in 2025, and typically Samia Suluhu Hassan and CSEM are going to win, and therefore people would prefer to go to Tanzania because they are going to have even enough power generation. The Julius Kambarage Nyerere Dam is going to inject into their system 2,000 megawatts. They are also getting gas-powered electricity from Mtwara, so they have more reliable, cheaper electricity. Our electricity is becoming more expensive. So from next year, if we are not careful, many investors will not be thinking about Kenya. We've got to cool the temperatures and begin to do what is right for the benefit of Kenya.
The president said he was happy that Tanzania had overtaken us in terms of how we run business across the Jumuiya region. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
It is a good thing if we praise our neighbors, but I've always said that if East Africa wants to thrive in the manner contemplated under the treaty, we must do things as one. You imagine that we had marketed East Africa as one. We would then not be complaining about reduction of visitors from the Mara into the Serengeti. We can do that. You imagine that we merged all our loss-making airlines, Uganda Airline, Air Tanzania, and Kenya. We would have a mega airline which would complement Ethiopian Airline. You imagine that we had free movement of labor and we marketed some of these things, our minerals. We removed tariff and non-tariff barriers, and we were acting as one. I look forward to East African integration so that the strength of Tanzania is also useful to us and the strength of Kenya is useful to Tanzania. And let me tell you, in Africa, the country with some of the best human resource is Kenya. Kenya is amazing in terms of the quality of the men and women that she has. You go into the hospitality industry, you travel across Africa, travel across the world, you'll see Kenyans. Kenyans are hard workers. If we can leverage on that, then we can really change things in this region.
That's true. Your prediction for especially the bigger geopolitical space?
I look at the world, I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not a Jewish prophet, but I can feel the pulse of the world. There is going to be intense competition between the Western world and the rest of the world. The BRICS, the Belt and Road Initiative by China is going to be flowering in the next few years. The Lobito corridor, which is coming from Luanda in Angola to Lobito and through, I'm told, up to the Democratic Republic of Congo, is going to be another competition. There's going to be a new scramble for Africa, for African resources. There is going to be a lot of saber-rattling diplomacy with people and warships being present in different oceans, defending their fishing rights, expression of political power. I see that happening. If we are not careful in certain countries, a country like Syria, if they are not very careful, even a civil war could emerge. In Africa, if we are not careful, a lot more governments could fall. In Asia, that is also a possibility, but one sees a rising Asia. Countries such as Vietnam are going to rise, Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia. These are countries that are going to rise. Of course, there are issues of climate change. We are going to have many more of these climate change phenomena. We see what is happening in the island of Mayotte, in that Mozambican channel. You are going to see more droughts. You are going to see more harsh weather. You are going to see water being an issue, potable water. So it is going to be a bag of many different things. And as I began, it is going to be the best of times and the worst of times. And if indeed the world will provide us with lemon instead of oranges, it is our duty to make unto ourselves lemonade. Because the divine instruction was, go ye and subdue the world. I hope we'll subdue the world and have dominion over it.